Hello everyone, my name is Mika and today we're going to be talking about a topic which is very important to us in Central Perk in relation to diversity. It's inclusive language. This video might take a while, so grab yourself a drink and sit and relax and enjoy. First, let's talk about what is inclusive. I have a screenshot here from Urban Dictionary, which is not the most academic source, but it gives you a hint about what people think the word inclusive means. And the word inclusive in the first place, as you can see, it means being accepting of different characters. People are different and we have to accommodate to that in a professional world and on a personal world. It also refers to all kind of minority movements such as feminism, LGBT, minority, ethnicities, religions, etc. Now, as you can see on the bottom, it says we're a very inclusive group. And this video is exactly about how can we achieve that, how can we be a very inclusive group. Here is my learning outcomes for this lesson. The first one is define and discuss inclusion. Why is it important? Inclusive language, specifically the do and don'ts, inclusive language techniques, and implementing and creating inclusive environment. Do make sure to pay attention to this because in the end of the lesson I will give a little exercise which is going to be fun in order to practice our inclusive language. Now let's talk about the primary meaning of exclusion and inclusion. Exclusion in its raw form, it just means to prevent or restrict someone from doing something or having rights or being able to do the same things as you can. Including, it means to cover or to include, and that also can apply for social things. For example, social exclusion is to repress actually people's right and prevent them or shun them from a community. And social inclusion is to make everyone feel welcome and part of the community. So naturally the question is, why is inclusion important? Well, because diversity on a campus, for example, campuses across the country are more diverse than ever before. More than just ethnic and racial diversity. There is non-traditional students, socioeconomic backgrounds, growth with the LGBT community, students with physical disabilities, students diagnosed with emotional and psychological illness, and strength, group, and self-awareness. In other words, we live in the Netherlands, which is a very multicultural place with many different people from different backgrounds, and sexual orientations, cultures, different religions, as well as needs. For me as an individual, I had to learn how to cater for everyone and make my language inclusive enough that everyone can feel part of my community. The importance of inclusivity in education. Diversity is an essential element of a successful college education. 4 forms of diversity that can potentially have an impact on students. Structural diversity, the context to which the student's population is diverse. Interactional diversity, experience with different races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, and cultures. Curriculum diversity, academic programs and courses. Experience for the future. After graduating, students will be entering a diverse and global workforce. I'm doing a program with about 20% of the students are of international background, including myself, so it is very important for me to learn how to be inclusive. And I'm studying to become a teacher, so for me inclusivity is part of my professional identity because I will have students from all kind of minorities and it is my job to make sure that everyone feels part of the class. No matter what you're doing, there will always be a colleague who's of minority of somehow, different religion, different sexual orientation, or just different background. Now let's talk about the opposite. What can potentially happen if we do not create an inclusive environment in the university? Students leave college unprepared or uneducated, in anxiety and stress, anger, violence, low GPA, depression, high dropout, transfer rate, and even suicide. All of those are very unfortunate and undesirable outcomes that we should definitely try to avoid by using inclusive language and creating inclusive environment. Another part of inclusive language is gender. So one of the things that I would like to talk about is those examples in front of you. For example, don't regender or degender. Create gender neutral terms. Convert adjectives to nouns by adding ist at the end of the word. For example, active to activist and journalist. Replace occupation terms containing man and boy, if possible, with terms that include members of either gender. Avoid occupational designation having derogatory et and est ending. For example, say an actor instead of actress. And lastly, this is a bit of a stereotype, but avoid describing men by profession and women by physical attribute. Next, we have race and ethnicity. Avoid qualifiers that imply that all members of a specific ethnic group or race are the same. For example, saying that X groups are really good at athletics and X group is really good at math and science. If you specify race or ethnic origin, be certain that it is relevant. For example, saying Chinese and Japanese are two different cultures. And you can avoid language that has questionable racial or ethnic connotations. Use a person-first language. So for example, say a person with a disability, student with a disability. Do not say the disabled person or the disabled student. Second, avoid using adjectives as nouns. For example, the deaf, the blind, the disabled. Rather use student who is deaf. If you specify the disability, be certain it is relevant. Avoid singling out one individual's disabilities simply for the sake of identifications. For example, do not say, you know, the blind student. Avoid using words that imply victimization or create negative stereotypes. For example, don't use descriptions such as victim or sufferer or someone with disease. Just identify the disease. Avoid using words such as poor, unfortunate, or afflicted. And lastly, don't say courageous when you want to say successful or productive. Sexual orientations. Use sexual orientation rather than alternative lifestyle or sexual preference. Use gay or lesbian rather than homosexual. Use the phrase partner or spouse. When discussing families, be mindful that of families that are headed by same-sex parents or transgender single parents. For example, avoid statements such as, how are your mom and dad? When using the terms diversity or multicultural, and reference is made to specific groups, include LGBTQ persons in such statements. Age. Mentions people age only when it's relevant. Let people of all ages speak for themselves rather than assuming what they already want or think. For example, you're older, so you're probably very conservative and traditional. Avoid making inappropriate assumptions about people based on their age. For example, saying, old people are all cheap. Additional rules. Use language that reflects the involvement of both men and women in sports. For example, instead of saying sportsmanship, you can use fair play, team play, sporting attitude. Avoid the pronouns he or guys when both sexes are included. I'm guilty of that myself, and I know many people who do that. For example, what we can do is to eliminate the pronouns. So instead of saying that the average student is worried about his grade, we can say the average student is worried about their grades. And definitely we should not forget about inclusive body language, because it is also very important, just as spoken language. Here are some general rules. Realize that body language is also a form of communication and critical to improving relationships. People often forget that what we say doesn't come out necessarily from our mouths. And lastly, body language can easily be overlooked, misinterpreted, and misused. So we are at the end of this session. I hope you guys have learned something, and we can just test that now. So I have a few sentences prepared for you, and all of them are not inclusive. So the question is, why is not inclusive in your opinion? Here we go. It's a man versus the environment. Why do you think it's not inclusive? Well, I think we use the word man often to refer to people. I think we can just say it's humans versus the environment. Next question is, that's so lame. Now, that's so lame sounds a bit innocent, right? Everyone used this sentence. My problem with this sentence is that the word lame actually refers to handicapped people, and there are people who are lame and they don't appreciate it. Next one is, that's gay. Now, saying that's gay is not necessarily a bad thing depending on the context. However, in some places, saying that's gay is often used as a bad word, and that's obviously not inclusive language. The next sentence is waiter or waitress. Now, I personally don't like to separate genders when I'm using inclusive language, and also if I'm out in a restaurant, it's sometimes a bit difficult to just assume people's gender because everything is happening so fast. So you can say, for example, just the server. The next one is mom or dad. Now, it is easy to assume that someone has a parents who are a female and a male because that is the majority. However, you might not always be correct, and that might create a bit of an awkward situation. Next sentence is to say that we are all immigrants. I have a very international friends, and I myself am an immigrant. However, I never would say that we are all immigrants because people's stories are different and no one have gone through the same journey. And I think not everyone wants to be called an immigrant, so I just don't say it. And lastly is to say something like, okay, boys and girls, gather your things. Instead, you can just say, okay, everyone, gather your things. So that was it about my inclusive language session. Again, diversity and topics like that are very important for us in Central Perk. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope maybe to see you at our living room at Central Perk. Yes, it is a place at NHL Stendon. Perhaps after the lockdown is over, I'm looking forward to it, and I hope to see everyone soon. See you next time. Bye.